Welcome to another fabulous, fantastic episode of My Orgasmic Life. I am your hostess with the mostest, Gaia Morrissette. And today's episode is brought to you by ticklelife. Okay, so I figured out something that I am super excited to share with you. While I was on this wonderful new adventure of quitting smoking, which was over the last 3 weeks ago, I got to have a new relationship with judgment. That's right, judgment. Now, if people know me, and for everybody who doesn't know me, judgment is not my thing. Meaning that I usually don't support any judgmental thoughts. I'm like this beacon of, safe, non-judgmental space. And so, often when I talk about judgment, I usually am coming from a place of like, well, we need to look at that, and that doesn't really serve us, and that doesn't really serve the greater good, and that doesn't really serve everybody around us, and we really need to drop into what our judgments are and releasing those judgments because it doesn't serve us. But then while I was quitting smoking, I got to have a new get to have a new perspective and a new relationship with judgment. And I want to share this insight with you, okay? So I need to preface this. This is super important. I found out that judgment can serve a purpose in a short-term parameters, okay? So I'm going to talk about what those parameters are, and we're going to put it in the confines of, how judgment can be beneficial, and when it becomes not beneficial. So don't be like, oh, Gaia totally said that we can be judgy. I am not saying you can be judgy. I am not saying that. That's not what I'm saying. All right. I'm about to share with you some insights in how it could be beneficial in a short-term period. So before I get into the nuts and bolts of this, I want to share a little bit about my insight and where this came from. So while I was quitting smoking, a really interesting thing happened. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, because this is typically not my nature, I became uber judgy, specifically with and around smokers while I was quitting. And 2 days prior to that, I was one of those smokers. So it was a very bizarre thing. And so I was like, wow. It was like the smell of the tobacco was disgusting. And, and it went from like, it smelled disgusting to I felt in that moment, and again, only in that moment, I felt that they were disgusting. And so that was really interesting for me because that's not typically me at all. I'm very much about, does this serve you or not serve you, not sitting in the place of judgment. So I just allowed myself, I gave myself permission to observe it and to be like, wow, that's so not me. And then I started finding that all sorts of things started to come up around smoking and smokers and judgment and these kinds of things. And I was like, wow, what's going on with me? So it was only a short-term period, and I don't feel that way anymore. I'm like, I'm on the other side of that. If somebody is smoking, I find the smell, not appealing, which is good because I don't want to like it, because if I liked it, then I would still do it, right? So that's part of the point. So this is what I figured out. Like guilt, okay, so let's talk about guilt. Guilt has a purpose. Its purpose as human beings to feeling guilt is so that when we do something that does harm to ourselves and others around us, we get this icky feeling called guilt. Like it feels awful. It's like, oh my God, it feels just horrible inside. And the reason we get that is to prevent us from being a sociopath. Okay? So guilt serves its purpose in the fact that we feel gross, if we feel icky, we don't ever want to feel that again. We course correct, we apologize, we own, we do whatever we need to do to not do that behavior again. And then guilt dissipates. Now, guilt, that's the purpose of guilt. However, often where guilt goes horribly wrong is that we then wallow in the guilt. We internalize the guilt, which moves from guilt to shame. Then we are awful, not whatever we did wasn't good. We're bad. We're awful. We're a horrible human being. And then it feeds and we fester and we feed and we get in shame. And then we feel like a horrible human being. And then it goes down the hill horribly wrong. Okay. But guilt in itself, for its short-term purpose, that's the purpose, is to make us feel icky so that we course correct so we don't become a sociopath. Now, what I think, and again, this is what I just observed recently, is I think judgment has a similar possibility of serving us. So when we are trying to do something different, if we're trying to course correct our own behavior, our own beliefs, our own stuff, if our brain kicks into creating a judgment, being that is not good, that is bad, that is wrong, and we then externalize it to the people and the circumstances around us, what that does, it helps us to disconnect. And when we disconnect, it helps us to disconnect from that, that group of people for a moment, helps us to disconnect from that experience for a moment, and we can step away, do what we need to do to recalibrate, to get into the place of like what serves us best. And then the key is, then we release the judgment. Just like the guilt, we release the guilt once it's served its purpose. We need to release the judgment. Now, what typically happens, this is not what happens. What typically happens is that we hold on to that judgment and we make it so that we are always right and they are always wrong. And what happens is that when we start to move from that mindset, and we really lean into it and we really believe it to be true, then, and we don't release it and we don't let go and we don't course correct, what ends up happening is that we believe in every part of us that we are a better human being or even more of a human than somebody else. And we go down the rabbit hole to a place where as human beings, we can actually murder, kill, destroy, oppress, abuse others under the guise of being justified because of the original judgment, which is they are awful, they are disgusting, they are bad, they are whatever the judgment piece is. Okay, so this is why I say it's really important that when we look at it, I am not saying that judgment is a good road to go down. I am not saying we can embrace our judginess. I am not saying any of those things. What I am saying, though, is that I do think that judgment in itself serves a purpose for us to disconnect so that we can course correct. And then we have to release that judgment. So I no longer, so in that moment of while I was being judgy for about 3 weeks, super judgy for about 3 weeks, while I was in that place of judgment, I really felt and experienced that, smokers were bad. Now, the problem is that, like I said, 3 weeks earlier, I was one of those smokers. And in essence, when we hold on to that this is why it's a delicate balance. Like we got to tiptoe in and then we got to pull out quickly. Like we can only stay in it for a very short time to help us course correct. That's it. Because what will happen is, so say I still believe that to be true. Okay. I know that that's not true. Everybody makes their choices for them that works for them or doesn't work for them. And it's their journey. It's none of my fucking business what people choose to do. Whether I agree with it or not is irrelevant. It's none of my business. okay? And I know that to be true across the board in everything, about everything. So if I truly still believed that smokers were bad, what that would mean is that also I then am sending a message. Not only am I, judging other people by the choices that they make and all those kind of things, okay? That's one aspect of it. But the secondary aspect of judgment, and this is the part where if we stay in it for too long, this is the problem with it, is that we also are sending a message to ourselves that we're a horrible human being too. If we think somebody else and somebody else's thoughts, somebody else's feelings, somebody else's behaviors, somebody else's choices makes them a horrible human being, if we ever have thought that or wanted that or desired that or did that, then what it also says to our subconscious brain is that we are also a horrible human being. None of that serves anybody. That festers into shame and self-loathing and self-hatred, and like it's not good outward or internally. Okay, so it's really important that when I say that judgment can serve us, I'm talking about for like a very short period of time, only so that we can sever and almost interrupt our behaviors and our patterns. Okay. Now, again, I'm going to say this again. I do not want anybody to say, well, Gaia says judgment is okay. I am not saying that. I'm not saying that it's okay to be judgy. I'm not saying it's okay that you go around judging other people's choices. I'm not saying any of those things. And the really important piece of this, okay, this is this is another thing that's really important. Besides just stepping into it for a second, course correcting, and then stepping out and then releasing that judgment, I kept it to myself. This is the first time I'm even sharing at all that I had that thought or that I was even thinking that. No one knew it. I didn't react to anybody. I did not impose my judgments on anybody else. I did not make anybody else feel bad, dirty, wrong, any of those things, because I was having those feelings or those thoughts. Okay? That's also really important, because the one thing with judgment that often happens is, in order for us to feel good about the judgment, we have to impose it on others. That does not serve. That does not serve you. That does not serve you, the world. It doesn't serve others. Okay? So very important. So if we're going to look at this new perspective of that, the judgment might have serve its purpose in a beneficial way for us to do behavioral changes and course correct in our thought process and in our experience, it's really, really important that it's for a short period of time. You keep your judgment to yourself so that you're not oozing it all over anybody else, and that you just give yourself permission to sever your connection for a short period of time while you sort through your own stuff around whatever that behavior is, until you can come up with some new strategies around behavioral modification for yourself. Okay, so that's what I have to say about my new perspective. I got a new perspective on judgment. So instead of being judgy about judgment, which is where I used to live, I now have a new perspective. I'm like, oh, it can serve it if in the right context and then in the right way. All right. So I want you to look at, and so here's a good way to decide whether or not a judgment is serving you or not serving you. Okay? Why do you have that judgment? Whatever it is. Pick one. We all have them. We all have judgment. Pick one of your judgments and be like, why do I have this judgment? When did I create this judgment? Did I take that judgment on from where did it get created? Did I create it myself, or did society create it, or did my parents create it? Like, where does it come from? And has it served me, meaning that you've only been in it for a very short period of time and now you can release it because you no longer, because at the end of the day, and this is the most important part, making a decision and judging another human being based on their choices and their life experience and their experience in the world does not serve us or the greater good in a long-term perspective. So I want you to really take a moment to be like, so for example, it would not serve me to continue to believe that smokers were bad. Like that judgment does not serve me, does not serve all the people who I love who happen to choose to smoke. Or all the people that I might meet, moving in my life that, they're in their path that they've chosen to smoke. I mean, there's lots of experiences that people choose to do that I don't do. But that doesn't mean that I think they're horrible human beings. But if I kept that judgment that was happening while I was trying to course correct and do the things and give me the space that I needed to be away from the old smoking patterns so that I could create new patterns for myself, if I hadn't have created that space, it would have been more challenging for me. So I created that space. My brain created that with a judgment. Then I did the work that I needed to do. I course corrected. And now I can spend time and hang out with and, be surrounded by people who smoke. It's no different than people that choose to drink or people that choose to eat sugar or people that, that eat, eat refined sugar or many of the other things that I've made some other life choices that serve me better. But that doesn't mean other people's choices, it's any of my fucking business. This is the really important piece. It's none of my fucking business what choices people make. It's their lives. It's their choices. Okay? So that's what I want to leave you with is I want you to pick one judgment that you have and really dissect it and to see, it probably most likely does no longer serve you. It's time to release it and let go of it and give yourself permission to be free. Give all the people around you permission to be who they are because it's none of your business what other people's choices are. All right. I love you all. Whew. This was a heavy one. Well, actually, yes, it was heavy. It was heavy. I love you all. You're all incredible. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And there's all sorts of awesome ways that you can hang out with me. If you need some support on how to move through, having a better relationship with your perspective around judgments or your sexual wellness or healing or crisis or any of the things that I do, you can find me at succulentliving.com. For all your BDSM wellness education needs, you can find me at empressgaia.com. Don't forget to follow me on all the social media platforms under Gaia Morrissette and Empress Gaia. And don't forget to check out ticklelife's podcast, which I also host, where we explore and we have conversations with experts about their personal lives. Yes, their personal sex lives, personal lives, relationships. What's going on? What's happening in the experts world? And don't forget to follow my Orgasmic Life podcast, which can be found on all the platforms, podcasting platforms. And don't forget to, I have my own app, my Orgasmic Life app on Google Play Store. And I just want to say, you're incredible for taking the moment to ask yourself these questions, to listen to me have conversations that may make you kind of uncomfortable at times. I'm sure I probably made you uncomfortable. It's part of my job, right? And I want to say kudos to you. You're incredible. Thanks for being one of the incredible beings in the world. Mwah. I love you all. That's it. That's all. Until our next show. Bye-bye.